Olympic lifting is an extremely touchy subject in the coaching industry. There's those who love it and there's those who hate it. Then there's those who just misunderstand it. So the question is, should you really use it?
So if you want to be an Olympic lifter, then of course. But if you have a client or an athlete that you think could benefit from Ollie lifts, then let's outline the major points in favour of. The good. The biggest one is peak power output and rate of force development. So this is where most pro Ollie coaches will hang their hats, and fairly so perhaps. Ollie lifts will return higher levels of peak power output versus your standard weightlifting options. And due to the need to really displace the bar fast, concentric rate of force development is through the roof. So if snappy concentric movements or big power is needed for your client's goals, Ollie lifting, from a purely absolute number standpoint, reigns supreme. Now they also teach us to move stuff with intent. Ollie lifts just can't be done slowly, doesn't work. So they in themselves are a constraint to give your clients some mongrel, essentially, and force them to want to snap barbells. They then take immense amounts of coordination and body awareness to execute properly. So no one is cleaning good relative weight off the floor if their limbs are sequencing like that wacky inflatable flailing arm man dude. And lastly, often overlooked, anything you launch up towards your chin, you have to catch and not fold under like Kenny Rogers. So they require a massive amount of yielding capacity or an ability to absorb some pretty tough forces. So everything we just said are all very viable adaptations for many a client's goal or an athlete. But, and there's always a but, there is some bad that comes with Olympic lifts. First and biggest covered problem is that there can be one hell of a steep learning curve. And every session you spend teaching the lift to someone is a session you're not actually getting that much raw adaptation out of it. Certainly less than you would from something like a simple trap bar jump. Two, the time alone it can take someone who's a little bit Gumby to reach the coordination needed in itself can also be a huge barrier from getting any good return on investment from these. Three, there is a prerequisite for good mobility, which a lot of people, especially athletes funnily enough, do not have. Four, there can be some higher risk with Ollie lifts compared to your more conventional ones. And they are extremely fatigue inducing, whether done poorly or properly. And finally, as a bit of a double-edged sword, but if you suck at one segment of the lift, then other areas can be a bit harder to progress or can be hindered. Now with the good and the bad being all laid out, I think Olympic lifts are a little bit misunderstood, and on three major fronts especially. First being, coaches hear the term Olympic lifting and they immediately think of doing the full snatch or the full clean and jerk. But there is a bunch of great derivatives of these that are so much more viable in a lot of contexts. So an effective coach might find the value in spending some time on teaching tech while pulling adaptation from Ollie derivatives. Now the second one, and this is probably going to ruffle some feathers, but they aren't actually that dangerous. So studies that return numbers of high injury incidents, I've seen at least, are done with beginners or your stereotypical CrossFitter, not in well-trained or well-coached clients. And in fact, injury rates are probably lower when a coach is involved. And they're actually pretty similar to that of other non-contact sports that involve strength and power. And they are even far lower than that of contact sports. So they're not that dangerous. The third one, and there's a saying that goes along with this, is a good tradesman never blames his tools. We teach our students to do these Ollie lifts very effectively in about 3 hours, in workshop 22 actually. Now there's room for improvement of course, but they can all do them. So it might not be that Olympic lifts are really that insanely hard to teach. It might just be that you never learned or don't have a system to coach them well. So this will not end the Ollie wars, I guarantee it. But I do hope it generates some more thought and discussion about it and sparks good conversation in the comments with us. And as a final thought, there is absolutely a time and place to use them. There's also a time and a place to definitely not. Just remember, their effectiveness seems to rely heavily on the coach and the context, not the client. So is it that they might be fine, but they're the wrong tool for the job you're doing now? Is the coach using them just to support tradesmen? Or are Olympic lifts really just that shit? Intakes at our Melbourne East and Melbourne West facilities are now open for mid to late April. On top of that, we have open but filling spots for our intake in July in Sydney. So if you know someone that could benefit from learning from the best in the business and doesn't want some crappy online only course, then DM us or go to our website to find out more.